Today we are doing an interview with the Sea Power developers. This game is one that has been highly anticipated in the simulation space, and I wanted to put some faces to some names, or rather, some voices to some names. We discuss how this project got started, how it evolved over time, what the dynamic campaign will be like, and what is in store for the future of Sea Power. I want to remind everyone that this game will be releasing this year, so if you're interested, wishlist it below with the link down there. If this is your first time here, this channel focuses on multiplayer sim gameplay, so if you're into that, please subscribe. So today I'm joined by the Sea Power team, not the entire team, but a decent sized part of the team. And we are talking about their really anticipated game that's coming out this year. Just so we know who we're talking to, let's introduce everyone. So I'll start with Niels. Can you let us know like who you are and what's your involvement in Sea Power?
Well, I'm one of the co-founders of the Triassic team. Most people probably know me. Killerfish Games, which I also co-founded, where I worked on the Fleet series games and, of course, Cold Waters. And I guess I'm kind of I'm art director and I guess lead designer, sort of, on the game, or pretending to be at least.
All right, Mech.
Yeah, I'm an art guy. I also came from Killerfish Games, where I worked with Niels on Atlantic Fleet and Cold Waters. I'm a co-founder of Triassic, and I do a lot of the artsy stuff with this game.
Dot.
Hi, my name is Ivan. I'm a programmer in C Power. I came from .mod, which I'm the founder, and the guys came after me, so like I'm one of a part now. Anyway, that's why I was invited into the C Power after the previous title, Cold Waters, which I made mod on. And in C Power, I'm working with programming mostly of internal stuff like weapons behavior, engagement tasks, bug fixing, etc., etc.
Ben.
Hi, I'm Ben. I'm a programmer on Sea Power. On Sea Power, I mostly work on our sensor modeling, our sensor fusion modeling, and the UI.
Okay, so now we have a good range of people, founders, art, coders, and system modeling. Just so we make sure we don't lose anyone at the beginning, but could someone give like a quick description of how would you describe Sea Power to a new player?
I can try. So Sea Power is a mix between tactic and RTS, because you go to the larger command level sometimes, and sometimes to the like more precise commanding of particular units. It looks a lot of like Fleet Command. So if players played Fleet Command, they find a lot of similarities. It's a naval strategy. It's a control of naval assets like ships, submarines, aircraft carriers, and their aircraft, also helicopters. With not only tactical map, but also much detailed 3D scene too.
For my eyes and playing it, it does really feel like it sits in two different worlds. Like it definitely is an RTS, but to me, it also feels like a sim in terms of like how much detail is modeled. Like usually when I think of RTSs, I think of like things like I don't know, StarCraft, Age of Empires, and there's not that much there's not that much system modeling. But what you guys did, you guys definitely really leaned in that direction. So to me, it seems like it kind of lives between both RTS and sim. But I'm kind of curious what you think about that, Niels.
Yes, it is nominally an RTS, but that mostly comes from the fact that you have more than one unit under your tactical control. But at heart, it's a simulation. I guess the best way to think about it is it's a single ship, single submarine simulation that's been optimized so the player can have tactical command of a task group or larger force rather than being just a single unit. Yeah, so a good example is, for instance, in Dangerous Waters, which is an old sim. You can play a Oliver Hazard Perry frigate, and you of course have a helicopter on board, and you can launch it, and then you can control that helicopter and use it as an off-board sensors weapons platform to do things that your ship can't. And what we do is that we basically extend this concept to the task force levels. So you take the role more of like a tactical commander at the scene rather than just commanding a single unit. But it's of course scalable, so if you just want to command a single unit, you can do that too. The game allows that style of play as well.
Let's talk about how Sea Power came to be, because you guys have talked about previous involvement, like with the dot mod or with Dangerous Waters, or sorry, Cold Waters, and other games. And I'm curious if someone can talk about, like, when did this idea come up to make Sea Power, and like how did the idea come up, and what were sort of like the initial ambitions when the idea first came up?
We started thinking about making what became Sea Power after we finished the South China Sea add-on for Cold Waters that was released early 2018, and we sat down with Niels and decided that it would be very beneficial for us to take what we have with Cold Waters and make it surface action game. Target Killer Fish at that time, but due to misunderstandings and differences, creative differences to put it that way, that never came to be. I left Killer Fish Games, Niels left, we formed with Martin Triassic and started, that was about a year later, came back to the idea of making that idea about surface action groups battling each other out on the water. But at that time, the game was much smaller scope. We were seeing that game as being taking place at around 500, but by 500 nautical miles maps or count areas, not a global scale, world scale as we have it now, and of course with a much smaller input on not only purely naval battles. So from that on, we started building up bigger and bigger game.
So one thing that Mick kind of refers to here is the original concept that we had at Killerfish was it went through. It never really went through the concept stage. I'm not sure what it would have ended up like. It probably would have ended up a lot more like what was eventually done by the .mod team. And actually, when we first set out to do this game with Triassic, the original concept was something much more like a sequel to Atlantic Fleet, actually. So it was kind of a turn-based thing.
If I'm not mistaken, Niels, it was planned for mobile as well, right?
No, it was never planned for mobile. But
sorry.
The idea was that Atlantic Fleet on PC had done well enough and felt like something that could be achievable. But as everybody knows, no plan survives contact with reality. So we very soon turned real time, and as it happened, Martin had already written the terrain engine, the basics of it, for a previous project. That was a bomber sim. It was kind of like it was kind of like Cold Waters in the air, or Cold Waters meets Doctor Strangelove kind of idea.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
It was it Cold War or was it World War II?
No, it was a B-52 sim actually.
Actually,
Isn't the B-52
the mother from that project is the one, the B-52 that we have in game.
Yep.
Because we started working on that and then decided that, nah, it's better to maybe go back and revisit the codename Task Force idea.
Yeah, and do what we know we can do, or thought we knew we could do.
Okay, so let me paraphrase real quick. So basically, you guys were doing Cold Waters, and at the end of 2018, you finished the last DLC, and you're like, okay, now it's time to do something new. some different ideas were looked at. You know, is it going to be turn based? Is it going to be more I don't know, instance based in terms of like you know, set map? Okay, so that makes sense. So could you talk about? I don't want to spend too much time on this, but you kind of already went into this a little bit, but like assembling the team and also like how you guys found Microprose, because I think that's kind of interesting that like Microprose now is like getting involved more in publishing more games. I'm kind of curious if you can talk a little bit about the team. I know you found Dot from the Dot mods. If we could start there, and then kind of get into Microprose.
I remember when I started having contact with you, Ivan. It was probably sometime in
2021 or 2020. The
no, it
first
was
time,
much. It was much earlier. Maybe it was Daniil I had contact with earlier than you.
No, it was me. It was me, and it was about the Epic Mode subject.
Yeah.
We talked to you first time. This mode became public, and so that's time we first talk. And later we talked time to time. I start to asking you a lot of questions during the adding ability to Cold Waters to import the external models, because they required the marmoset shader. They were visible through the fog. A lot of technical difficulties you taught me and explained how to deal with. So yeah, we started to have conversations during my modding phase, whereas a lot of info were needed, so I I bothered you with every difficult question I had.
Yeah. So anyway, I of course kept tabs on what you guys were doing with Dotbot, and it wasn't long before I started to realize that, hey, these guys are adding features that we're working hard on our end to add, which is like the entire selling point of our game. So I had like two options. I could either ask you not to add features, which would be kind of strange and a dick move, or I could just like ask you if you can do those features for us instead and get paid for it, which you of course didn't say no to.
How could we? You hooked me up pretty from the first screenshots, because like Cold Waters, yeah, we added a lot of features, but the engine of Cold Waters never ever allows for the same gameplay as in Sea Power. All surface combat in Cold Waters is just how to say, imagination of this combat.
Yep.
It's not how it works in reality, and it never could, because the correct radar detection is not written in the Cold Waters. It is only in the terms of pretty simplistic, only for submarines. So, like, to turn down ability to make what I want, but in the correct environment, which does indeed allows to do it properly, I would be crazy.
Well, you heard the guy.
I want to get involved. I want to get into system modeling, but before we do, could we talk about the Microprose thing? How did you guys get linked up with them?
Well, as it happened, if you know Task Force Admiral.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Task Force Admiral were in contact with Microprose. With David Laghetti, who of course is CEO of Microprose. And well, we kept discussing the subject, and we're all old Microprose fans, right?
Right.
And yeah, I mean, Microprose games were kind of a formative experience, at least for me as a kid.
Yeah, definitely for me.
Yeah, I mean, spent so many times playing F-15 Strike Eagle, Gunship, which I had on tape, Airborne Ranger. I mean, lots of great games. So at this point, we also kind of knew that we, being a new entity, we didn't have the fan base or the market recognition, brand recognition that Killerfish had. And it kind of seemed like a good idea for us to partner with a publisher, and where we felt we shared the same core values. So that's kind of how that came to be.
There you go. Could we talk about the design of the game? Because I think what's interesting is that the game does have a substantial amount of system modeling that may not be obvious to players. I did
That's Ben's domain.
yeah, so like I did a video on sonars to try to explain like what's really going on, because you can't, obviously you can't see a sonar, but you can see the effect of it in terms of like on your map. So I'm kind of curious if you can talk about what are some things that are modeled in the game that may not be obvious to players.
Well, actually, it kind of almost you can find some clever thing in like almost all systems in the game. For example, I bet you don't know that you can launch the Shadow missile from the Kinder class cruiser to nowhere, and then it flies and activates its seeker. Its seeker starts working like a portable radar and relaying contacts to you. And it's like realistic because it's the radio command missile, which has a link with the operator, and operator have access to all contacts detected by the seeker of this missile. So like there is kind of complicated modeling between not between but beneath everything that you see in the game. So if mostly of course it's for sensors, because sensors are very complex thing, and it's like it's a two complex things. First is detection. Each sensor has certain conditions why the target could be detected. For example, for the airborne radar, there are factors like horizon, Earth is curved, and target could be hiding behind horizon. Radar parameters like peak power, frequency, gain of the radar, which influence the distance too. Next, it's the radar cross section of the target, and the angle of this target is important because the radar cross section is not a constant thing. It is easier to notice ship from the side when looking when it's how to say, when it's ball looking towards you, because it have a smaller profile. Also, some radars, and it is especially older ones, have problems detecting stuff over the ground clutter, so there is a look down mode. Obviously, this is not portrayed anywhere in game because otherwise we will just flood it with data. So in the end, you just see the result. That's the one complex part, detection. And the second complex part is processing. And this is the Ben's kingdom, because it's not like that you just detected that contact and that's it, because even a single ship can detect some target via different sensors. All information from this. And when you have multiple units, ships, planes, submarines, all this information is gathered and fed up into the plotting system. And here I might pass the word to Ben because no one knows better it than him.
Yeah, sure. So I think that the most interesting thing to talk about in the plotting system that isn't immediately obvious, though you see a lot of it, is our target motion analysis, or really target state estimation system that's used to estimate enemy positions based on emissions, be they electronic or sonar, or just generally anything that only tells you which way they are and not how far they are. What we do is we do a technique. It's based on Kalman filtering. And what it does is it continuously makes a probabilistic estimate of both where they are, which is what's displayed to you with the big ellipse thing on the map, but also how fast they're going, which is I think the biggest piece of hidden state that we have currently in the plotting system. And through this mechanism, we're able to give you a pretty nice realization of both being able to figure out where a target is based on like the history of where you've seen it before if you're a single vessel, or based on multiple vessels seeing the same target from different perspectives and then stitching that together. Internally, we then propagate this, including the uncertain information about velocity state, and then you can see this sort of realized in the game by how big and how those ellipses are moving, but it's all sort of under the covers.
So when it comes to modeling a system, right? And like I said, the way I was just thinking of this game is that it's an RTS and it's also a sim. So when it comes to modeling a system, how do you guys talk about how much modeling is too much modeling? Like where do you draw the line where you need to obscure something versus you need to go fully deep and model it all out? Like how do you guys think about that?
At
Well,
least
it's kind of
from sorry.
yes, sir, Ben. I was
Sure.
just saying it's kind of situational, right? It depends on each system. Yeah. Now, Ben, you.
Yeah, at least from my perspective, it boils down to a couple of questions. I think that the biggest one is, does it have a meaningful gameplay impact, right? Like does adding this depth cause the game to become more interesting, deeper, and more fun, frankly. We don't want to add 10,000 buttons that model a system that no one cares about or that doesn't actually do anything that doesn't actually do anything for you as a tactical commander. We want the systems modeling to be something that is a source of depth, but also ideally not a source of, I don't want to say frustration because it can be at times, but something that you can learn and exploit as a commander. I think that the key challenge is then how do we choose the right level of abstraction for these different systems so that we can present something to you that captures the sort of relevant detail of them while sort of nicely hand waving over the all of sort of the nitty gritty little details that you might get in a game that was focused on exactly one vessel, for instance. I think that bringing this back to TMA for a second, what we do there is a nice illustration of that, because in other games you might capture this process using the sort of actual technique of TMA, where you're drawing lines on the map and estimating travel times based on the scene bearings, whereas we just handle all of that for you automatically.
Yeah, another good example, actually, because I think a lot of people who will play Sea Power played the Cold Waters, is the difference between Cold Waters and the Sea Power identification system for the sonar. So in Cold Waters, players had that screen where they can compare frequencies of the contact with the frequencies of the table of known vessels and submarines and find what it is most likely. Now, in Sea Power, it's not like that, because it was fun when you command a single submarine. If you had to do for each sonar in your fleet, sonar buoys from the helicopters included, it probably stops being fun and starts being tedious. So in Sea Power, you just have combined screen, made by Ben actually, with available information about unit, what propeller type, what size of it, known key features. And you can get impression like what this unit can be and what it could not be. So it will be identified eventually. What?
Can I say something?
Uh-huh.
So the great irony here is that in Cold Waters, the sonar signature screen is it literally is complete smoke and mirrors, because, well, I know because I actually hand painted all of the signatures in Photoshop. So all of the signatures are completely made up by me. No, non-data driven or anything, right? But in Sea Power, the signature analysis window that you can call up by right-clicking a contact on the map and clicking information, that actually is data-driven, and it's driven from the actual emissions that your sensors are picking up from that contact, which is why it can narrow itself down. The more data you collect from different sensors, or the more different sensors it emits from data from, the more your signature analysis library kind of narrows down the likely culprits. There's actually much more about like realistic signature analysis thing than anything that was in Cold Waters.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting because this is I feel like a common topic in Sims. Like it's, I mean, of like where you draw the line in terms of like how far is too far. I think Ben, what you said about like, is it additive to the gameplay? I think is interesting. And I do think, as someone who has played the game, you guys have done a pretty good job on the balancing act, because let me say it this way, I've been pleasantly surprised to find that some things are modeled, and it hasn't been completely overwhelming. It's like just enough there where it's like, oh, like this is really interesting that it works like this. Let me do a little like reading to figure out like how it works, but it's not like overwhelming. So I think you guys actually did a really good job with it. I do want to talk about more about what's going to come to the game in the future, but before we do, I did want to talk about the dynamic campaign, if we can just shift gears slightly. Now, we're having this interview in mid-October. The game is slated to release, I think it was publicly said, like in November. I'm curious, and we haven't really seen too much about the dynamic campaign. There not too much has been said about the dynamic campaign in public. So I'm wondering if you guys can talk about what's the state of the campaign, and just kind of pull the veil back a little bit, because I know a lot of people are like really anticipating it and have been asking about it.
The thing about the campaign is that it was planned a long time ago. It was planned already back in 2019. And at the time, I worked out the rules set for it and the mechanics for it. It was basically an outgrowth of a concept used in Atlantic Fleet, which made sense because we were originally planning kind of like an Atlantic Fleet style game. But we actually, me and another guy that we had at the time, Olaf, God bless him, we actually took my rule set and we printed out the map on paper and we played it as a pen and paper game. And we kind of found out that the movement system that we had planned wasn't really ideal. It was very difficult to accommodate time and scale, right? So the problem with that approach was that we could work out a system that worked pretty well for the North Atlantic, or that worked pretty well for the Falklands or the Persian Gulf, but not for all of them. And of course, the solution to that is a real-time campaign. So last year, we actually started porting the mechanics and rule set from the old campaign system that was turn-based into a new real-time campaign engine that really channels the dynamic campaign in great naval battles. If your readers are familiar with that title, what that is essentially it's a theater-scale real-time campaign where you have fleet level command, and you select what ships to deploy to what forces and where to do patrols, what escorts to allocate to convoy escort duties, what ships you want to allocate to HW pickets, that kind of thing. And what we always kind of had planned was basically the campaign system exists to provide context to the battles. So it's a storytelling mechanism at heart. The problem with single scenarios, like when you have isolated type scenarios, is that you don't have kind of constraints you have in a real situation, because you don't have to worry about tomorrow. You only have to worry about finishing the scenario. And if you finish the scenario and you win, then you won and all your worries are over, right? Whereas and traditionally this is kind of a problem with the typical canned campaign style where you play one mission after another in a set linear fashion. Usually these campaigns are really just a string of isolated scenarios played in sequence, or sometimes things carry over, ammunition stocks, damage states, if you lost some units or something. But again, because it relies on pre-generated, isolated scenarios, replayability will always be limited. Whereas with a true dynamic campaign, every little decision ostensibly matters. So you really have to think about, especially if you have things like permadeath, you really have to think about risking your ships or wasting your ammunition, because you may not be able to replace your losses or rearm in time without making strategic sacrifices somewhere else. This also means that the dynamic campaign kind of has to be a simulation of war in its own right, and you can make a very simple implementation where the dynamic campaign basically just generates randomized battles. You can then implement some rules and have like permadeath mechanics and get it somewhat closer to reality. But to have it really close to reality, you have to have, at least in my personal opinion, you have to have some mechanics that simulate external events, especially in a maritime setting, because the war at sea really is an extension of war at land, which is in itself an extension of political conflict. And all of these aspects have to be simulated in some way if you want any kind of realistic scenario or realistic outcome. Battles just don't take place in a vacuum in the real world, and they shouldn't be in games that call themselves simulations either.
Okay, so let me read back what I think I heard. Okay, so
Sure.
I think what you're saying is that and stop me if I'm going if I misheard, but I think what I'm hearing is that the campaign was thought of really early in the process of the game's development. It was seen as something that was really core because for any sort of like simulation slash war space, like the context that or story that a campaign can provide is really key, and there's a lot of consideration in terms of like how much, like just like the system modeling, there's a lot of consideration that needs to go into account of like how much of campaign modeling is there, right? Like, does damage persist after a battle into the strategic map, or does ammo carry over and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so okay, that all makes sense. What do you think that the development cycle will look like for the dynamic campaign? Because I think like in terms of like from my eyes, like I have access to the game, I'm playing it, but I don't have access to the dynamic campaign. So I'm kind of curious of like the game or the available part of the game. I guess how do I want to say this? Like the scenarios in the editor are very clearly playable because I'm playing it. But the dynamic campaign seems like it's still cooking a little bit. So I'm kind of curious if you could talk about what's the development cycle going to look like for the campaign, like because we have early access release coming up soon. So I'm kind of hoping you can clarify this a bit.
Right. So we actually do have quite some work done on the dynamic campaign, but it's just that you've seen the rest of the game and just how much work there is, right? And we only have so many people to go around, which is kind of a chicken and the egg question, right? Which comes first? And we just never have really been at that comfortable place where we could just like spend all the effort we wanted on the campaign, right? But there are some fundamentals that have been done so far, and really, I would say the big things that are left for us really is to we want to work up a really solid strategic detection model that is fun to play, right? We want the campaign to be fun to play for people. It should never be tedious.
So this tedious thing and the strategic reconnaissance, this is something that I actually had thought about. I played War on the Sea for a little bit, and I personally found, I know some people like that game, but I personally found the campaign to be really tedious because
Yes.
I kept getting and it had to do with this with the reconnaissance at a strategic level, because you would have a fleet of like, I don't know, 20 ships, whatever, and then one little float plane would fly by, and now you have to stop what you're doing and get sucked into the tactical combat. So I think what I'm hearing is that you guys are trying
that's
to
really
avoid
annoying.
that. Yeah, it is really annoying.
Yeah,
but you're trying to avoid that.
Yeah. So again, this is kind of where we are channeling an old game from 1992. So basically, there came out 2 seminal naval sims in 1992. The first one, of course, that everybody knows is Microprose's Task Force 1942. That kind of set the standard for a dynamic campaign, right? Task Force 1942 is essentially what War on the Sea tries to be. It's the same scenario. The mechanics are fundamentally the same. A lot of the interface is the same, but War on the Sea goes more into granular detail with things that were completely automated or abstracted in Task Force 1942. Like in Task Force 1942, the only recon planes you have are from your home base at the Spirit Center, and you can't even put waypoints for them. You literally just assign, this is how many I want to patrol, and they just kind of fly out on fan courses, and if they find something, right? And as far as float planes and things go, doesn't exist. Carriers do not exist. It's solely surface combat. Whereas, of course, War on the Sea adds all of these missing aspects. And then the other game that came out in 1992 is Great Naval Battles, North Atlantic. And it also has a dynamic campaign. And it basically allows you to play the entire surface campaign in the North Atlantic from 1939 to 1943 as the Germans or the Royal Navy. So in that game, you have a lot of ships at your disposal, and the play area is vast. I mean, the North Atlantic is a big place, right? And they also let you they put you in charge of like the standing patrols, convoy escorts. But the way they do this is that they abstract and automate like the detail mechanics of it, and basically they give you the big decisions of which ones of my ships do I want to delegate to convoy escort duty if I know that the Germans have managed to sneak a couple of battleships out in the North Atlantic convoy lanes. Okay, then maybe I want to take some of my better battleships, put them on convoy duty, or my convoys will get massacred. But that leaves me with fewer heavy units for my quick reaction task forces that I have direct control over. And of course, direct control, you have you put down waypoints and you do the chasing much as you would in Task Force 1942 or War on the Sea. It's just that you don't have to do it for every single unit under your command. And to me, that's always been a key concern when I've worked on the dynamic campaign, because if you want it to remain playable, then the control decisions that you have to make, the granularity of it has to scale with the number of units you add to player command. So what works if a player commands 1 unit might not work as well if a player commands 10 units, and it definitely will not work anymore once a player commands like 50 units. So that's where a lot of design work has been done, and also we spent a lot of time. We are using in the campaign. We are using an operations-oriented system. At least that's a working concept that we're trying to implement. And what I mean by that is that it's not a free-form sandbox where the player just does as he wants, because again, that's not how conflicts work. So even if you're the commander of the Atlantic Fleet, you still have someone higher up in the food chain who gives you orders that you have to fulfill, and that you then command your subordinates, right? So we want to simulate that higher chain of command for both sides, actually. So there is the potential for like initiative type scenarios where you are working purely offensive against AI, but also reaction type scenarios where you have to react to operations initiated by the AI opponent that may thwart your own plans if they're left unattended. And that's also where we want to take things up a bit by having an event system that takes input both from the actual campaign mechanics, like what happens in the battles, how the battles affect the outcome of the operations, affects events on the ground or in the world, that in turn affects future orders given to you or future operations initiated by the opposition, and also completely like random events that just happen, but they may influence your side, they may influence the AI side, they may influence both of you. Again, because what we really want is to create a campaign system that is kind of theater agnostic, if you may. We want to be able to simulate a big strategic conflict like the North Atlantic, but down the line also a much smaller contained conflict like the Falklands campaign, for instance, but still do it in a way that is dynamic, challenging, and entertaining.
Okay, that was a lot. It's okay. So you guys are definitely thinking about a lot of different things. It will. I'm having a hard time visualizing it, but I think it's one of these things that is not easy to explain. You kind of have to see it to really experience it. Could we talk about just the last thing on the dynamic campaign, then we'll move on? Because
yeah, actually, I can answer that. So, what it actually looks like is actually it's very similar to some of the bigger mods for War on the Sea, where they like extended the campaign to cover the entire Pacific. That's kind of like what our campaign looks like, but the interfaces and the mechanics of it are different. But there is still the common denominator that there are task forces that you create and you tell them where to go on the map and what to do. But as I said, it differs in the details.
wait, so I never. The only War on the Sea campaigns I played, I played like the Dutch East Indies one. So that was more of like wait, was that full? No, that wasn't full Pacific. That was just that was just the Dutch East Indies. So is the campaign going to be more like on that sort of scale, or is it going to be like global?
It's not global. It's well, it could be. I mean, as you may have noticed, there are no real geographic constraints in the game. But at least as far as the North Atlantic campaign that we're planning covers. Actually, I have I'm being an idiot here because I have a map that I can probably show.
Yeah, send it over. I'll put it in the video.
Just see where it is.
While he finds that, are you guys excited for new missions to hit the Steam Workshop to see what the community cooks?
Oh yes, we are definitely.
I actually already played a few which were in the first test modes. Namely, the stealth guy,
Mhm.
that's the 17 mod. We test the mod that made Matt, so it's working. So yeah, it's kind of nice to see that C-Power is not out yet, but mods already appearing, although it's testing at the moment. And yeah, I hope that we will have some interesting missions, because we already have.
Okay, I'm gonna post this paces here. So
All right.
And I definitely would like to put missions you guys played on YouTube into some folders, so player also can relive their experiences from the videos that you posted.
So
Okay.
this is kind of a rough area that the campaign will take place over.
So okay, so this is like the standard dynamic campaign that will be more like the North, based centered around the North Atlantic, Mediterranean, and okay, and like, is the idea that there's going to be like starting fleets, like is there like a you know, like Hearts of
Yeah,
Iron,
there are
where
order.
like, you know, Hearts
Yeah,
of Iron,
there's orders of battle. There's
yeah, like,
orders of battle. Yes.
yes, thank you, orders of battle. So basically, you start like a. Are there going to be like different starting dates, like, you know, 60s versus 70s or whatever, or is it just like one starting date and then you have the one order battle and you just kind of let loose?
Well, we'll start with the one starting date and get that right, and then we can do the others.
Yeah.
But as far as like changing the orders of battle, that in itself should not be difficult. So we do want to have the ability to play like 60s versions of the campaigns, but then we still have to create a lot of 60s assets that are not there yet. So it's going to be an ongoing project for sure.
Okay, so let's talk
Yeah,
about that. So
and
go
I
ahead.
think here, let me interject, because like the thing is with campaign now that all the consequent campaigns will be easier and faster to make, because right now what is doing is the bottom part of an iceberg. It's foundations, it's the campaign engine, it's handling of the units, it's how they move, how they interact, etc., etc. So yeah, 60s, maybe some other campaigns they are expected, and they will be quicker to make than the first one campaign. Because yeah, right now we're laying foundation. Dynamic campaign is not available now in the menu, but actually it is already a huge amount of work done there internally. It just simply that it is not fully enough yet. So we're still building foundation. That's why it's disabled.
Okay, so is the ambition that the dynamic campaign is going to release with the early access, or is it going to come like a little bit later?
No, it'll have to come later because as much as we were hoping that we could get an actual playable alpha of it, unfortunately we're not going to be able to, because we just don't have the manpower resources to do it. And if we did spend more time on doing that, then we would have to compromise the integrity of the tactical part of the game. So it's kind of stuck between a rock and a hard place there, unfortunately.
Okay, let me say one thing, okay? Because I'm going to say something a little comfortable, but give me a second, okay? Let me cook for a minute. So I think some players, especially people on this channel, are going to be a little bit surprised to hear that the dynamic campaign is not going to come at early access, and I think that's going to bum them out. But I will say that as someone who has played this game, I actually am having fun. I think I have over 30 hours in this game, maybe 40, and I am enjoying myself. And I do find myself wondering. I'm like, oh, like I kind of want to play Sea Power right now. And to go back to what we were talking about earlier about the Steam Workshop, I'm really looking forward to this game releasing so other people can make missions, because I'm an idiot and I'm not very creative. I have a hard time making my own missions. So I want the game to release so I can play other people's missions. Now, War on the Sea, which I played, and it had a dynamic campaign. I played that game for like 5 hours. Like I got no disrespect to the team. I know that it just wasn't my cup of tea. But I'm just saying this because some players are going to think the dynamic campaign is a requirement in order to play. And I think right now, with how much the game actually has, I think you guys can probably get away with not having the dynamic campaign at the initial release because there's already so much to do and the game feels good. And the fact that you're going to have Steam Workshop capabilities with mission sharing, I think that'll be a thing that can hold people over in the meantime. Does that make sense what I said?
Well, yes. I mean, personally, I would think that most of the players who are interested in the dynamic campaign would rather play a dynamic campaign that's actually like polished and refined, where they don't have to feel like they are constant alpha beta testers, right? Or whereas like we have to push so many updates all the time that break their saves and or where the campaign breaks because of like bugs, etc. All of which were kind of endemic of the campaigns in much simpler campaigns in both Cold Waters and Atlantic Fleet. And I do think that since we ship with a mission editor and workshop support for user created missions.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about the future of the game because now we have an idea of what the game looks like. We have an idea, a little bit of a better idea of what the campaign is going to entail, and players have seen the game with videos and have a concept of it. And you guys have a concept of what the final game will look like. So could someone talk through what's the big difference between then and now?
Well, we thought we had a concept of what the final game would look like already back in 2019, but as we said before, no plan survives contact with reality. But to actually answer your question, I don't think the game will look substantially different from what it does at present, because while we may have had different vision when we set out, this is kind of where our ambition and creativity has led us. So what the game is now probably is the most representative of what we actually wanted to achieve all along. And what I can see is that we just add more gameplay modes to it, more ways to play the game. Things like I can see things like supporting linear campaigns, for instance. And of course, we want to expand on the content that is in the game. So a typical subject that comes up is why we don't have a Royal Navy. And well, the obvious answer is that there are a lot of ships and a lot of planes, a lot of unique stuff. So it's a lot of work to get it done. And well, me and Mech, we're just two men, right? So we had always planned to do Royal Navy post-release. So that's one area where we're going to put effort. We're also going to add a lot of the missing units for the Soviet and US sides that won't be making it into this release. So it's just, to answer your question, the game is going to be, final game is going to be just more content and more refined version of what we're releasing in early access now.
Okay, two last questions on this. Okay, one, the dynamic campaign screenshot you shared. Thank you for sharing that. Now, like, if someone, like, are you guys planning to do like, I don't know, DLCs in the future where like you might do like a I don't know, a Falklands campaign, and then that DLC will be the big thing that adds the British Navy? Like, are you guys kind of thinking in that way, or are you guys hoping that people make mods and make their own dynamic campaigns with different parts of the map, like, I don't know, India versus Pakistan type of thing? I'm kind of curious. Or is it too early to say?
People will add mods either way because part of the game is being sort of open sandbox that is mod friendly. But yeah, the prime idea for DLC is doing Falklands and assorted Argentinian and Royal Navy assets for that.
Yeah, and that also will help to kick us off getting started on the Royal Navy proper, which is of course much larger than what was present in the Falklands.
We want to do Royal Navy justice once we start working on it. So it's not only the assets, as Nils says, that were present at Falklands, but also we want to kick the game a bit back in the timeline. Not maybe go into 2000s, but go back to something like Cuban Missile Crisis and the likes, gone hot. So the early 60s, because that's also a lot of very interesting designs. Not saying they were successful, but they were interesting, and a lot of concepts for how to do naval warfare back then, and also a lot of fancy aircraft from that period.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Okay, actually, sorry, let me start over. So first off, doing DLCs and adding stuff like in thematic packs, I guess is a good way to say it. Like, okay, like we're gonna do a Falklands one, which comes with like, I don't know, Falklands campaign and British assets and Argentinian ones and whatever. That makes sense. And the other thing too is that the stuff with the 60s and doing like a Cuban Missile Crisis, I actually really agree. I think that the older you get on some stuff, the more janky it is, and sometimes it's a lot more fun because those ideas, some of them, some of them were good ideas that got refined and persisted over time, and other ones were not so good ideas that don't exist anymore because they've been replaced. So I actually tend to find those really interesting. I actually was goofing around trying to make a Cuba Missile Crisis mission because I thought that was kind of interesting, and I could see there was like, oh, there's actually some assets for 60s, but I could see it being fleshed out a lot more, so that makes sense. The last question I had is, I know you guys have said something to the effect that depending on the release, multiplayer may be in the future, and you guys said like, the game has to be a success in order for this to even be considered. So like, do you guys have any sort of idea of how big of a success it needs to be? Like, are you like, or is it way too early to say? Just curious.
I would say it's too early to say.
Too early, yeah.
All right. Well, I do wish you guys luck with the release. I know it's coming soon. I know you guys, players don't see this, but I've been I feel good about this project because I do get the sense that you guys really do care. As soon as we got our hands on it and we started to tinker around with it, you guys were really quick to ask about reactions and have been really jumping on things really fast. So that's been really interesting and I think it's a good sign. You guys aren't just like releasing it and dumping it and then just like don't care. Like you guys obviously do care. Really looking forward to the dynamic campaign, and I
Yeah. So can I say something? Well, obviously we do care because the entire reason that we're doing this game is because if we didn't do it, I mean, no one else would, right? You can never get this kind of thing done in a corporate setting because, like, too risky, right? So we have been self-funded from day one with this project, and that is, of course, why. That is the reason why we have to release in early access to begin with, because we were always kind of like, well, we really want to release a 1.0 game, but well, there are financial realities to contend with. So, yeah.
No, I get it. These are the sim niche is what I always say. You might find this funny, or you might find this scary. But what I always say is, being an enjoyer of these games is a little bit of a curse, because the niche is really small. So anyone who gets involved in the scene from like a development standpoint or business standpoint is obviously a risk taker because it's a lot of risk and the reward is definitely capped in comparison to the rest of the gaming industry. It's not like a mobile game where, oh my god, like can you imagine like how much money those games make? So I definitely understand.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I mean, a lot of the reason why the mobile games that make a lot of money is because they have, quite frankly, predatory business models.
Sure.
Again, I think that's something that's, like, for those of us who grew up in the 80s, where you bought a game and it came in a box and you bought it and you played it, and they always had value, right? So even if you bought just like a budget game, on a cassette tape for like $10. There was still a little booklet in the case, and you would have like all the background. Usually, the background plot to the game was printed out, and maybe some nice illustrations. So there was always like, even to the cheap stuff, there was always this kind of added value that is missing from a lot of the stuff today. I mean, I've been in the game industry, both in like the AAA and mobile spaces, and well, I could still be there, right? But there's a reason. There's a reason why I'm doing C Power instead.
Totally. And players and listeners of who are listening to this right now are, I'm sure, going to be appreciative. Anything else that you guys want to get out into the universe? I know we touched a lot of different things, and if anyone, I don't know if you guys want to do like a turn each and just what do you want to shout out into the void?
Well, I personally would like to stress that like every single member of this team comes from a simulation and modder of simulations background. I mean, myself and Mick here, we spent probably a decade modding Strike Fighters. It's one of the classic sims, yeah. The rest of the guys here either may worked on games or modded games in the sim and strategy space. So, well, those are the people that are making this game. It's not like there is not a suit in sight.
All right, Mac.
Was that a stupid thing I just said?
No.
You can cut it.
Actually, I think you said a very important thing because we are making game to play. The purpose of this game is to be played, not to, I don't know, to propose to promote some agenda or something, or like make money and run away. No, first of all, we want to make a product which is nice, which we want to play ourselves, but we don't have it on the market, so
because no one else will take the risk to do it.
And I will add that we want to basically sustain this game for a long time. We have some plans already in our heads, as we said earlier. Also, what about scenarios where you are protecting mainland USA from enemy bombers in late 50s? How does that sound? That could also be cool, and it's achievable in the game already. Just its proper period-specific assets and systems. And again, we are self-funded indie guys working on this game with a passion for the subject.
Ben, anything you want to scream into the void?
Yeah. So this is a little bit flippant, but be careful for your computer's sake what you asked for, because I think that we're going to have some really cool simulation features in the future that will both really push the realism and ease of use envelope, but also how well your computer can handle them.
Oh, don't worry, I will stand in the way of any performance hunger feature relentlessly.
No, yeah, it makes sense. I mean, it's like I said earlier, it's like how much is too much. So it is interesting. Like, I mean, there's this really good quote that I like in the Falcon 4 manual, and it talks about, I'm going to paraphrase, but it's like if you try to model an airplane and you just let the engineers go wild with it, they're just going to make an airplane. But you're not trying to make an airplane, you're trying to make a simulation, and that's a different thing. And it's like the art of
That's
simulation.
the hard part.
Yeah,
we have this often requests in the Discord about making carrier deck management more sophisticated. So you can actually prep some planes, park them on the deck, do this, do that. Well, first of all, let's go into another game. I think there is one with carrier deck or carrier deck manager or something. Next, it will be fun for only first try. next time when you have to prep your planes and command submarine and send recon and prepare task force for strike and get away some high value assets from the enemy strike, you will just forget about all this.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason why. There's a reason why we originally contemplated adding all of those like alert states and controlling that, and why we abandoned that in favor of something that is admittedly more streamlined, but still doesn't allow you to just simply spam aircraft like in some other games.
Yeah, because the initial implementation was just a single animation. So, for example, carrier used only one catapult all the time and just spawned the plane out of there. It's when so this is the more sophisticated concept actually when it was even planned for. But well,
Also,
people always want more.
We mustn't ever forget that games also, no matter how intricate they are, they might need to be fun.
Yeah.
Because they are pastime and leisure subject.
Exactly. So if you found yourself like hard working in the game, then probably something is wrong with the game.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I said my piece. I want to thank you guys again for the time today, also for making the game. I think you guys did a really good job of hitting the balance. We all look forward to the game's release in November of this year. And I wish you guys like good luck on the release, okay?
Thanks.
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 Thank you very much.
And
Thank you very much.
thank you very much.